Hello, my name is Martin Surl, the Police and Crime Commissioner for Gloucestershire, and welcome to the second of our virtual webcast with our Chief Constable Rod Hansen. As before, we are in different buildings, being filmed, taking account of the social distancing that is important and applies to all of us. I've got to say that I've been impressed with the way the Constabulary has dealt with the coronavirus and dealt with their duties. It's a very difficult time and I have been impressed. But of course, as part of my role in holding the Chief to account, you're not there for all those conversations. So this webcast gives you a chance to sit in on that conversation and make your own mind up and hopefully learn something of interest. Rod, thank you very much for this, and our second of our webcasts. I want to look a little bit beyond the immediate issues of coronavirus, but also to deal with a few questions from the public. And one, I think you're aware of it, I saw a letter from a member of the public who told me that because of COVID-19 and you're so busy with that, you couldn't investigate his crime. Was that correct?
Yes, it is correct that we sent a letter to a member of the public who was concerned about the quality of our investigation. We've looked into the matter. It was regrettable. The circumstances were that the letter was drafted by a supervisor within something called our initial investigations team, which sits alongside the force control room who receive all of our calls. And that initial investigation team does what they can from their location to start an investigation. And what happened in the early stages of our preparation for lockdown was that we were predicting that there would be a great strain on our resilience. We were unsure how many of our staff would end up needing to be shielded or sent home to work or off sick indeed with symptoms. And we were also preparing, if you recall, for the combination of our response team coming together with our local investigation function, converging and ultimately working a 12-hour shift. Now, all of that led us to prepare for what would happen if the demand completely outstripped our ability to resource it. The letter was written in that context, and from the review that we've done since the gentleman made the complaint to us, is that the officer's intention who sent that letter was pure. They thought they were doing the right thing. It wasn't sanctioned beyond that level, and we've since, of course, understood that we've managed to cope with the demand, and those letters weren't technically needed. So it was a preparatory move. It was sent in error. The disappointing thing in particular for that member of the public is that he didn't realise at the time how much we had done to investigate his particular matter. There was a good investigation. It's just that the letter he received was sent inappropriately, indicating that we hadn't done anywhere near the amount of work that we had.
So Rod, just look into the future when this passes or it changes. And if there is a situation where the evidence is there, are there any crimes that you won't be investigating because they're not important or you're too busy? You understand that every crime matters is the mantra of the police and crime plan for the next 12 months at least.
Yes, and we're very conscious of the focus that you've given in your police and crime plan to every crime matters and every contact counts. And it's not our intention to let victims of crime or those who need us down. So we'll do our best to make sure that doesn't happen again. That's
very reassuring. One crime that is a horrendous crime and we're very worried about as a country is domestic abuse. And reading the press, all types of the press, it's suggesting that there is an increase in domestic abuse and maybe we haven't seen all of it during the lockdown. What's the picture in Gloucestershire as far as you're aware?
So we've been trying to track this internationally with countries that are slightly ahead of us in terms of the lockdown and their return to their new normality. We've also tried to track it nationally and locally, and I'll just give you a bit of a flavour, if I may, of what's happening nationally in the UK and specifically then in Gloucestershire. What we've noticed is that there is significant interest in the website access to domestic abuse charities. Their websites have received far more interest than they would ordinarily have received. And that's possibly an indication of people seeking information in lockdown. There isn't a significant increase in the actual number of domestic abuse incidents being reported to us. So interest high, numbers of reports not significantly rising. However, and that's the same in Gloucestershire and also in the 5 forces throughout the southwest region. So there's a consistent pattern there. However, it's fair to say that in the 6th and 7th week of the extended lockdown, there does appear to be a steady rise. And I suspect we may have reached a tipping point where reports and referrals might start to escalate. It's possible that when we come fully out of lockdown, we might see an increased reporting level. I think in the only other indication that we've tried to map is the use of something called a domestic violence penalty notice, a DVPN as we would call it. And we've seen an increase in the number of those being used. Normally it's about 1 a week. It's been rising to 2 to 3 a week following the lockdown, and we've issued 6 in the past week alone. And just in case anyone's particularly interested in what those are, they're notices that we can serve on an alleged perpetrator to perhaps prevent them from seeing a potential victim or from leaving a family home. So it's there as an immediate measure, later backed up by the courts, and we're seeing a slight increase in the use.
I think I'm reassured, and maybe the public will be as well, that you're very actively monitoring the situation. It's an awful crime. We know that mainly women are victims, but not entirely, and they suffer very badly and sometimes don't know where to go for help because they have children, what have you. I think this is important. What help is available to somebody who's suffering domestic abuse? And I assume the officers know how to give this advice if they're approached, or even partners and friends and shopkeepers alike.
So we've put in place a very strong capability to build on the one that we already had prior to lockdown. We've reinforced it to make sure that if anyone needs our help, they can access it. So some examples would be, of course, referring to partners in the county. Gloucestershire Domestic Abuse Support Service, GDAS, are still operating, albeit from their homes, on a Monday to Friday 9 to 5 service, and they can offer advice and guidance, and we can signpost vulnerable victims to those charitable bodies. Of course, the police are available, we 24/7 via 999, or in a less urgent circumstance 101. And can I just take this opportunity, please, Martin, to remind potential victims that if they do dial 999 and they are in fear of being overheard, they can just then press 55 to connect straight through to the police, where they cannot speak to the operator, and we'll know what that means and respond immediately. But there's also channels in via text and emails to other charities such as Crime Stoppers, Refuge and Women's Aid. We can help with providing emergency accommodation through our partners. We don't provide it, but we can help access it. And if people are concerned about how they actually leave the home, us or someone like GDAS as an organisation can help get them out safely and into safe accommodation. I've talked about the DVPNs, the notices where we can require people to leave immediately and seek alternative accommodation to protect the victim. And we also provide emergency alarms, replacement phones and other equipment to help people able to contact the police if they feel that they can't do so without our help. And of course there are a wide range of apps available, including Hollyguard, which is particularly relevant and poignant in this county. You're
saying if you're a victim of domestic abuse, the lockdown is not a reason. Come forward, you'll be taken seriously, you'll get support probably more than ever now. You must speak out, is that right?
Yes, and an absolute warning to those who might think that they can exploit it. That is not the case.
Thanks. And when the virus first hit, we spoke and we said the police and crime plan still remains relevant, and one of those Audubon not overlooked will become even more important. And we were worried about potential scams on the elderly, potential burglaries on the elderly. Generally, anybody who's vulnerable, there are people we know, sadly, in our county and beyond, who will take advantage of any situation. How has that manifested itself here in Gloucestershire? Has there been an issue, and how have you coped with it?
Crime overall, we've been tracking very closely. It mirrors the national trend that crime is down about 27% across many crime types. So just over a quarter of crime level drop. We've had to, of course, use the space that has given us to put additional resources out into the community to, in effect, police the COVID lockdown. So it's given us a bit of swing space to move away from some of that crime demand and move into the communities, which is where we want to be anyway. I have to say, though, there is still crime being committed, and our staff are out there day and night, 24/7, doing a fantastic job dealing with some pretty unpleasant stuff, as well as policing the lockdown. There is nationally Action Fraud, which is a national reporting body, and in the first instance members of the public may well go to Action Fraud. In fact, they're encouraged to, and we've just been tracking the increases. There's not huge increases. What we've actually seen is a change of the types of scams occurring nationally and locally. So not a huge increase, but there's clear evidence that the criminals are adapting to particular scams. So for instance, using government branding to try and trick people, including HMRC branding, to make spurious offers of financial support. We've had fake websites and emails purporting to be genuine companies, and the situation is likely to continue, taking advantage of people who are particularly vulnerable, perhaps isolated, less able to talk through with their friends and their neighbours and their relatives about whether or not something's legitimate. And I'm pleased to say that we are making some arrests and intercepting some of those that want to prey on the vulnerable. And just recently we managed to arrest an individual and charge them for knocking on the doors of elderly care homes and residence homes, trying to scam those individuals out of their pensions and their money. So some successes. The key here is prevention, to try and make sure that we do all we can to help people stay safe.
Going back to the day-to-day stuff, the government's still been very clear to us that the rules are still in place. We mustn't leave our homes apart from particular purposes. But the papers are full of, is it being eased off? Are we seeing an increase in people sort of, just going out for a little bit longer or whatever? What's the policing view on that? Have things started to creep back and be eroded slightly?
Yes, we have. I've been into work most days since the lockdown started, and I have to say that anecdotally it appears to be busier on the roads. In terms of trying to get some statistics to evidence that, we have something called automatic number plate recognition. You'll know about that, Martin. And we've been seeing about a 70% drop in traffic on the roads through those ANPR reads since lockdown started. But in the last 2 weeks that started to rise by about 5%, but I would say at least 5%. So yes, there are more people, it would appear, on the roads. That's to some extent understandable if lockdown starts to get eased and more shops get opened. So there'll be more staff and there'll be more people travelling to those. But also it could be a sign of fatigue in people, particularly in good weather, many weeks now into lockdown, feeling that they want to just stretch the guidance and start to travel. And my advice would please be hold your nerve and stay off the roads and in the safety of your home, for the sake of the wider community, unless you absolutely have to travel. We've been present on the roads, but also in our communities since the lockdown has started. Our approach has always been to follow the 4 E's, initially to make sure that we engage with the public to explain the guidance and encourage people to comply with it. We have, where we've needed to, use the tactic of enforcement, and that could mean a fine. We've issued up until yesterday, there may well have been some issued overnight, but 166 fines across the county. We will only do that if we feel that people are significantly breaching the lockdown rules or flouting them. We are a county where we have been suffering a little bit from people travelling from outside the county to come to their second homes, but also it's a beautiful county. We've talked about this before. People with their boats trying to go down to the beach or to go camping or to go on some kind of a holiday, they can travel through the county. So we will turn them round, we will warn them, we will encourage them to do what they need to, but if needs be they will be fined, and on occasion some have been arrested.
Thank you very much indeed for that explanation, and we will monitor that because we don't want to become an over-oppressive force, but we want to become an effective force, and we agree on that totally. You're one of the biggest employers in the county, and a good one, and I know it's very important to you, this particular point. You know what I'm going to say, I can tell. How are your officers coping, physically, mentally, and the staff as well, because we are a police family. The officers rely on the staff, and every one of us goes out there to try and make it a better place. How are they bearing up? I mean, I think sickness levels were quite high just a few weeks ago. What's the situation now?
Well, thank you for asking, Martin. You'll know that we've had a well-established supportive leadership and wellbeing programme in place for the last couple of years, which is a good foundation to build on. We're not complacent about anything to do with welfare. And we've talked in the last webcast and holding to account around some of the measures that we've been putting in to protect our staff. The PPE situation has now improved, and that we feel we have adequate PPE for our staff. And so we're trying to look for some indicators about whether or not we've got it about right to look after our staff. And we've had feedback from our staff associations, including the Police Federation that represent members from PC right up through to Chief Inspector. And the feedback is that now we've catered for the PPE and we are treading carefully with the wear and tear that 12-hour shifts can have on our staff. The questions coming from our staff are much more about policy and what will happen next, and the process about returning to a new normality rather than personal needs, which to me is a healthy indicator that I hope we're doing our best to look after our staff. They're definitely out there doing a great job. I was looking at the incident report yesterday, and overnight we'd had 2 of our colleagues injured, one taking someone into a hospital who was in detention but needed hospital care and was assaulted and ended up with a cut lip, and someone else injured as well, trying to deal with a violent shoplifter. So they're out there, they're responding to COVID, they're also dealing with some tricky non-COVID related crimes and incidents, and I think we're bearing up very well, and I'm very, very proud of them.
That's good, because a lot of our time is spent not just dealing with COVID, it's looking to the future. So let's just look at some of the things. One of the things I promised to do was to reopen Lydney Police Station, and I know that you were very much in support of that. It was a joint decision. Where are we on that now?
Well, again, your first priority since 2012 in your police and crime plan has been accessibility and accountability. And we've talked many times about one police station in the forest not being enough. The Colford team do a great job, and they try to thin themselves out across that area, and it's a tall ask. So the ability to open up Lydney Police Station has been very welcomed by us. It is open now. We have our neighbourhood police team using the building, and it's a launch pad, of course, to get to different parts of the county, but as importantly, it's a place where the public can know and be reassured that we are present. There are some technical issues around the line into the building that will allow internet access. That's being worked on, but with COVID, of course, it's a little bit tricky. There's a little bit more of a delay in getting some of that infrastructure in place, and when that is in place, we can move many more colleagues into that building and turning into a thriving hub. So it's a very welcomed addition to our estate. Thank you.
I've said for years we haven't got enough officers. You've kind of concurred with that, but it's getting better, isn't it? The recruitment, has that been paused during coronavirus, or are we still on track with that?
One of the 2 things that wasn't stopped, one was public order training, just in case we needed to resort to that capability. Hopefully we won't. But the other was recruitment, because the pipeline of new recruits has to continue. We've talked about how we've put in social distancing measures to keep the staff and the trainers and the public safe during that training. It's working well. And Martin, you and I both went to see separately the latest batch of new recruits, which started a week ago yesterday. So they're coming through. We have a good pipeline, plenty of recruits coming through the system. There have been some adaptations. The College of Policing are working on, for instance, an online assessment process. We've had to make changes to the fitness test, the biometric testing, but by and large the recruits are coming through. We are on target, in fact slightly above target, at 1,209 officers as at the 31st of March this year. The further intake I've talked about started on the 27th of April, and that's, by the way, our first intake of degree apprentices under the new police recruitment scheme, which is quite a milestone in terms of how we recruit police officers going forward. There's been a slight pause on transferees. There's been a national agreement to stop transferees in and out of all forces for obvious reason, to be resumed hopefully in September. But just before that happened, we managed to get 6 through the door just about a month ago. So we're in a good position. We don't expect the uplift to be affected by COVID, but we're keeping a close eye on it.
What about the bank holiday? I don't know if they're going to relax anything before then. What do you think?
However tempting it is, I'll say it again, we've come a long way together as a county, but we have some way yet to go. We haven't been given authority to return to normality, whatever new normality will look like. However tempting, and I know it's VE 75th anniversary celebration day on Friday the 8th of May, please celebrate it in your homes or in your workplace if you can do so safely. Don't travel unnecessarily, it puts people at risk, and we must keep reminding ourselves that this is a public health crisis, and the consequences of getting this wrong are that people can and will get ill, and sadly they can die, as we've seen, which is a tragedy.
Well, thank you, Rod, and I wish you and all your officers and staff well. And for the public, I really hope you found this useful. If you did, you can watch it again. It's being recorded. It's on our website and on social media channels too. But thank you very much for watching. Please keep safe, and we'll do this again in a couple of weeks' time, all being well.